Hello, welcome back to the channel, the podcast, however you're tuning in. My name is Rhiannon Morgan. Everyone calls me Ree. Welcome. It's so nice to have you here. Today, we are going to be talking all about the absolute roller coaster of emotions that parents go through when their kids are being assessed for. I'm going to talk about autism specifically in this because that's the experience I've had. But I'm guessing, and you guys can let me know in the comments if um, you can probably
If you think traditional job polish is good, wait
my
till you
goodness,
taste.
my iPad, lord, apologies, jumping into something. If you sorry, totally thrown there. What I was trying to say is if you, are going through, an assessment and diagnosis process for your kids for anything else, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to substitute the word autism for ADHD, perhaps medical conditions. When you know, so I'm talking about autism today, but when you know that there's something going on with your child, or you're worried there's something going on with your child, and you think, okay, I need to get them some help, or do I? We're just going to be talking about the whole process of how that journey goes as a parent, because it can be a lot. I have 4 children who are all absolutely amazing, wonderful human beings, and they all have autism. And honestly, the last of them to be diagnosed was a number of years ago, and it was one of the best things that we did to make that happen, to have that understanding. I myself was diagnosed with ADHD. I want to say last year. Was it last year? I think it was. Um, and the understanding of how your own brain works is huge. The older my children get, the more they are appreciating that understanding of how their brains work. And the easier it is for me now to parent them. So, just sort of going from where we are now, I think the first thing I'd like to say to you, if you are on this very turbulent journey, and I'm going to talk about why it's a bit turbulent in a minute, but if you're on this very turbulent journey, I'm hoping that some of the things I'm going to say today are going to make you feel less alone, because I know I felt very alone at lots of points during this process. And like no one really understood. We'll go into a bit more detail, but basically, what I'm trying to say to you is the fight is worth it. And even if my children had been assessed and then they've been through all the assessments and I was told, no, they don't have autism, that would have been fine too. It's not about what the result is at the end. It's about being able to understand your child and get them the help that they need if they need it. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So we're going to dive into that in a second. Very quickly, I just want to apologize. I'm not sure if you can tell, my voice is still incredibly strange. We were supposed to be doing this live chat last week. Apologies, I had to reschedule it. I was so rough. I was really fluey. So my voice is a bit odd. I'm still coughing a lot, so if I have a little coughing fit, in apologies in advance. Apologies in advance. I've also managed to this morning throw my lower back out. So if I suddenly start laughing, that's what I do when I'm in pain. If you ever saw me in labour, then I laughed all the way through it. It's a very odd, inappropriate reaction. Or if I start wincing, it's because I've moved awkwardly, because I've totally thrown my lower back out. So we're just going to smile through it, pretend everything's fine, and yeah, just keep going. So if you are joining me live, just say hi in the comments. If you are watching on replay, then please do, join the chat too. And if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, because yes, this is my podcast, which I think we've renamed the Organised Life Podcast with Rhiannon Morgan, something like that. I don't know. I need to work on the branding for that a bit better. But if you are listening to the podcast and you want to join in the conversation, then head to the YouTube version and we can chat there. Okay, so I think the first stage of this roller coaster that we get on um, is, in fact, wait, I'm going to share one more thing just before we get on the roller coaster. Okay, we're cute. We're in the queue for the roller coaster at this stage. Um, what I want to say is that I don't want anyone to think that any of this is by any stretch complaining or whinging about my children just before, because you feel like when we talk on the internet, just before anyone thinks that. This is not about whinging or complaining about my children. This is more um, understanding the stress that the system is putting on parents, or the lack of any structure or the lack of any decent system. So it's more, yes, it is a complaint. It is a complaint to some degree. It's complaining about the lack of education in the world, the lack of support in the schools, in the healthcare, in all the things. And my hope in talking about it, the reason I'm talking about it is hopefully the more of us that talk about it, the more understanding the world will have, the more kids will be picked up earlier. Maybe someone watching or listening will see something in their children. They'll be able to get their children help sooner. Maybe someone watching or listening will be a teacher and they will be able to notice signs and symptoms of kids that perhaps masking in this class. And I think if we can just send these little ripples of understanding out into the world and we can all just educate ourselves and learn more. And don't get me wrong, I'm still learning all the time about all this. I don't think it will ever stop because the information's changing. But basically, what I'm saying is, this is not me complaining about my kids. I don't want anyone to think that it is. But if we can all learn a little bit more, we can all help everybody's. We can all just be a more understanding world. I'm going to have a little bit of sip of some caffeine because I am flagging a little bit today. I'm going to be honest. We're going to smile through it, but I'm not what you might call healthy yet. Okay. So anyway, so the roller coaster, we get on. At the beginning of the roller coaster, we're totally oblivious. Now, this might not be the case for everyone. I mean, maybe before you have children, you are already an expert in autism, and I'm sure some people, before they even have kids, know so much about autism. Maybe they work with kids with autism. Maybe you are a consultant pediatrician that specializes in autism. So unless you are one of those people, or maybe if you're just at the stage in life where you've heard a lot of content on the internet or whatever, but if you were me, my very first stage of this roller coaster was a total lack of understanding and being completely oblivious to what autism even was, let alone that it might be relevant to any of my children. I think I've shared this before, but all I really understood about autism before my kids were before I had kids, I suppose, was there's one child that I knew of. I think that was the only person I could think of that in real life I knew of that was diagnosed with autism. And this person had very extreme complex needs, things far beyond autism as well. I think with hindsight now, I mean, I was only like a child or teenager at the time. I think this person had multiple challenges that weren't just like health conditions and complications, but this person was completely nonverbal and could never be left on their own ever. So, that's what you're presented with. You think, well, that's what autism is. And obviously, it is a spectrum and it is quite challenging that so many different types of people, I guess, like from an understanding point of view, so many different levels of challenge, so many different complex needs, and so many different varieties can all come under one name, can be very difficult to understand. So my first journey on the roller coaster was, I guess, not even knowing I was on the roller coaster. And I suppose I started to notice challenges that I was facing with um I guess I noticed William's challenges first. So Dylan's our eldest, and then Will, and then the two girls. Um, I noticed Will, his challenges when he was, when did I even start noticing? It's so difficult to even pinpoint when I first started noticing, but really, he was very much a child for me, as in he was not interested in anyone else. And he was a complex child. He won't mind me saying this now because we talked about this. He was a child with complex needs that as long as I provided the routine and structure he needed, he was absolutely 100%, million percent fine. He was fine. And I suppose I had other people, other family members perhaps, saying that he was challenging because of how I was parenting him. But still, it didn't even occur to me with autism. And I'm going to be a million percent honest. Dylan, our eldest, it didn't even occur to me that he had autism until I learned so much more about it. And I probably at least two of the other kids were diagnosed. Yeah, I think it would have been two of the others were diagnosed. Until then, it didn't even enter my mind. When I had Dylan, I used to I say to people, "Wow, I absolutely adore this child. I live and breathe for this child. He's my absolute flipping world." But I do not understand him. I was like, "Wow, boys are weird, aren't they? I had sisters. Boys are something else." I do not like his behavior. I do not understand him. I love him. I don't get him. Men are from Mars, women from Venus. So that's the first stage is the oblivious. And then there's the kind of the flicker of curiosity. Maybe there's a lot more education about autism and what it really is these days. I like to think that everyone is a lot more educated about what autism is and that autism is so much more than someone that doesn't speak at all. Um, there are so many more variations of that. Obviously, there are some nonverbal people with autism, but it can be it can look like so many different things. And of course, the other stereotype is gonna be honest, I haven't even seen the film Rain Man. I should probably watch that, shouldn't I? But I understand what the stereotype is. But the incredibly intelligent, um, but socially so awkward, stands out a mile. Very obviously struggling socially, and those are kind of the two um, stereotypes, I suppose, that people think of. The people with autism, are very, very clever, aren't they? That stereotype, or the sort of can't speak at all. And the flicker of curiosity is like, are we looking at something here? Like, is this? I guess we don't like to use the word normal, I know, but I think when we first have that flicker of curiosity, it's like, is this something? Is it typical? I suppose. Is this typical for other kids? Because ultimately, when we're parenting, and maybe you've got more experience if you are a childcare provider or something, you've dealt with so many children. But if you're a parent, generally your only experience is with your own children. So you don't know if things are, let's say, typical or not typical. You're just like, oh, is this how it is? Is everything this challenging? It's only when you kind of maybe speak to other people or see other kids that are happy to wear shoes without totally losing their minds. Will's thing, we were talking about this the other day. He would only wear doodles. Shout out in the comments, you know what those are. They're like little canvas shoes from Clark's. Will doesn't even remember this. I had to find a picture of doodles for him. And they're like little canvas shoes, and he would only wear these specific canvas shoes come snow, rain, sleet, snow. And then he would have such a meltdown in the shoe shop. I'm like, please just bring me a larger pair of the same thing so he doesn't know and we'll just leave. And that went on for quite some time. Obviously, that is a phase we're well beyond, and he's very chill with shoes now. But um, at the time, I guess I was like, "Is this, is this just what kids do? Do all children?" And it was like, there's a flicker of, is there something we're looking at here? And then there's kind of there's the denial and the defensiveness. I think that people kind of go into. So I can't remember exactly when I thought about autism in relation to William, but I can remember certain um, milestones, certain signposted events, I suppose. So I know he started nursery school. So in Wales, they start. It's totally different to England. It's very confusing, but nursery in Wales, very confusingly, they like go to nursery, which would be a childcare setting. That's not what we're talking about here. I think they have that in England too. But the nursery class in Wales is the pre-reception class that's attached to the school. So generally it will be just like the next door classroom within the school setting, and it will either be just mornings or just afternoons. It's half day and it's sort of preparing them for reception. And actually it's really beneficial, and it's free because it's just school. So anyway, Will was preparing to go to what they called Rising Threes. So nursery would be the school year in which they turn four, and Rising Threes they don't offer in every school. It depends on capacity, but Rising Threes would be where they're going. It's sometimes the day after they turn three, the term after they turn three, and it was he was due to start that. So he was three or about to turn three. And I remember saying to the teacher, "Look, he's incredibly bright. He can already read." And she's like, "We don't do that in nursery." I was like, "Well, he can, okay." But if you expect him to keep his shoes on indoors, sit down and join in with the children, or just fit in with the classroom at all and do as he's asked to, you can think again. And I was very blasé. I was like, I'm pretty sure he's somewhere on the spectrum, but very blasé about it. Um, and again, it was sort of like a throwaway comment, I guess, like a little back of my mind, no real oh, I didn't did I believe it? Did I not? I don't know. It was just sort of a throwaway comment, but clearly I knew there was something going on. And then when he'd been in school for a bit, this teacher pulled me aside, the classic, "Can I have a word?" Okay. And she's like, when you said about autism, I think you were right. So I think we need to refer and have a look at that." And she suggested I went through the health visitor because the way the system works in Wales at the time, at least, I mean, we are talking 10 years ago, so things may have changed. But the way things were working at the time was if you went through the health visitor when they were under 5, it was a lot quicker and a lot slicker. Ultimately, they see some of the same doctors because one of the doctors specifically that assessed my little kids through the healthcare system also clearly worked through the education system, but the referral path, so the pathways are different, but ultimately they got to the same place, just through the school was a lot of a longer route. So when she said, "Okay, I think we're looking at autism here, you need to go to the health visitor and refer," I went into total denial. At that stage, I was like, okay, I just looked for evidence that it could be pretty much anything else. I don't know why I did this. I'm going to be honest with you now, talking to you right here, right now. I don't know why I did this. I can't really explain it. But I was just like, no, that can't be true. I guess my it, my understanding of autism didn't fit with the way I saw William at the time, and the two didn't fully match. So although I was the one that said it in the first place, I still went into denial. I was very polite about it, but I saw the health visitor. I found all this evidence that actually kids that were more able and talented, super gifted, can sort of display. I can't remember where I found this research, but I'd I'd found through some sort of confirmation bias this research that I got the health visitor out and I was like, look, the teacher said this, but I believe it that he's just super gifted because I mean he is incredibly intelligent. And that can sort of appear as autism. You agree, don't you? And she was like, yeah, yeah. She just agreed with me. So I went back to the teacher. I was like, right, I've spoken to the health visitor and she says, I mean, she disagreed with me, but she said it's just this. And she went to me, no, you were right the first time. And then I was like, oh. Now, I then went into the next stage, which is the research rabbit hole, which we'll go down into a second, which was perhaps perhaps not the most stressful phase, but part of the roller coaster. She did say that it was really nice that I was one of the only parents she's ever dealt with, having taught for quite some time. And obviously, you've got to speak to a lot of parents and say, hey, I think we're dealing with some sort of additional need. We need to refer here. I was the only one that hadn't totally lost their minds and got really cross, which is interesting. But I think that kind of anger and defensiveness isn't helpful as a parent if you are trying to speak to a teacher who ultimately is trying to do what's best for your child, but is a reaction that a lot of people seem to have. It is very much the case. And in fact, there was an incident that I didn't handle very well when Dylan was younger that could have alerted to me to what was going on so much sooner. And now with my hindsight is 2020 vision, I can really see that I should have acted differently then. And that was he was really struggling to read. Turns out he just couldn't be bothered, couldn't be bothered, couldn't be bothered. And then one day he was reading Harry Potter. So shortly before this, suddenly he's reading Harry Potter phase. And he's just like, oh, I want to. So I was convinced he was dyslexic. Like, right, he doesn't want to read. He must be dyslexic. So I pushed for him to be assessed for that because I thought, if that's the case, then get any help he needs, whatever. And the what was it? The educational psychologist said that he had language processing difficulties. So I thought, well, that's just nonsense. You're just talking utter rubbish because Dylan was and obviously still is very, very fluent for his age, very like a little adult. Okay, I now understand where that was. But what I didn't understand at the time was the language processing. So just because he was speaking using very grown-up words, it doesn't necessarily meant he had the receptive language skills. So he didn't necessarily have full understanding of the words that were being said to him, or even necessarily the words he was using, because some of it was scripted speech. Now, could that have been handled better? Could that have been explained to me better? Could I? Yes. Honestly, yes. Could I have handled that better? With what I know now, yes. But with what I knew at the time, no. I just thought he was talking rubbish. Um, With hindsight, I would go back and have a word with myself and be like, well, why do you think he brought that up? Maybe if you don't understand it, if you think he's talking rubbish, ask him to explain it to you. And that's what I would go back and say to myself. But that anyway, can't, shoulda, woulda, coulda, can't go back and change it. But I think the message I would take away from this is if someone ever says something to you that you don't agree with, lead with curiosity rather than being defensive and dismissive. And I wasn't rude in any of these situations, but I was definitely dismissive. Um, and I suppose in denial. Then I was like, well, that's just nonsense. Anyway, so then we go into the research rabbit hole. Research rabbit hole is hard work. By the way, if any of this is kind of ringing true with you and you are going through this process, I've got a couple of things for you. This one's a freebie. This is 100 Signs of Autism in Children. And if you go to mummyoffour.com/100 ASD, then you can grab this. This is a totally free guide. And this, it's not like it's not a medical document, but it's just got a whole load of things for you to go through and think about and to tick off and to see whether you notice any of these signs in your children. Because I think one of the big things I found was I just felt so useless sometimes, and we're going to get to that. But some of the meetings, some of the questions they asked me, I just felt underprepared. It made me feel like a bad mother. And some of the signs they'd ask me about them, and I'd be like, well, I don't know. I haven't been looking out for that. And I think if I'd been better educated about the kind of questions they were going to ask, about the signs I was going to be looking out for, I would have been better able to advocate for my child earlier. I wished, and in fact, I said to them at the time, I wish you'd give me these questions in advance so I could actively look out for, like, well, actually, does he bring you things? Is one of the questions I remember them asking. And I'm thinking all the time, well, I don't know, does he bring me things? Whereas if I'd known they were going to ask that, I would have been actively like looking, is he bringing me things? And then I would have noticed that he wasn't. And it would have made a lot of sense. The argument was that if people know the answers know the questions in advance, they'll prepare for them and skew their answers to skew the results. And I mean, that might happen, I suppose, but I just felt really underprepared. And I personally felt that I would have been better to answer more completely and more honestly with the right information. So, 100 signs of autism checklist. Also, if you are inside of my Organised Life Club, inside of the club, I have got the Autism Journey Journal, and this is a place to document everything. I would suggest printing this out and putting it in a binder folder. And every time you get sent anything to do with your child's assessment or diagnosis, or put it all in one place, because my little ADHD brain really struggled to keep track of all of the paperwork and everything that was going on. Um, I did not have all the organization systems 10 years ago in place that I have now. I really struggled with staying on top of it. And then sometimes there'd be a year between one appointment and the next, and you'd be just like, wow, okay. I don't remember what I was supposed to be bringing you, what was said last time. Anyway, so the research rabbit hole, let's getting back to that. Oh, sorry, very quickly. The Organised Life Club, details should be below to join. It's mummyoffour.com/join. The Autism Journey Journal is inside there. There's loads of other bonuses inside of there, or you can purchase that as a one-off, but you're better off checking that out inside of the club. Anyway, the rabbit hole. So, yes, once you are kind of past the denial stage, you think, right, jump into action mode. What can I do? What can I do? And I am very much a doer, and I feel that taking action helps me. And this is why I know having the Signs of Autism PDF and the Autism Journey Journal, this is why I've created it for younger me. I can't go back in time and give it to her. So I've got it for you guys. And I know that taking that action would have helped. The action I was taking was research, but then other actions that you can take are record. So I think so many people do slip into that research rabbit hole. And I think one of the ways that we can feel a little more in control of all of that, because it's taking back control by educating ourselves, and that's absolutely something we should do. But also by recording as much as we can, then that is arming us with information for when we are meeting with healthcare professionals so we can advocate for our children. One of the other stages, now shout out in the comments if you have done this, is once you start learning about autism, you start seeing it everywhere. And then you sort of thinking, Am I just seeing this everywhere because I'm immersed in it right now? Or was it there all along and I was totally oblivious? And you start seeing it in family members because, yes, it's hereditary. And suddenly you're like, oh, that's why Uncle so and so has always been. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That thing, my parents, my childhood. Oh, maybe you see it in your partner, maybe you see it in yourself. But you start seeing it, and it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's really awkward because you can't exactly go around to people going, "Oh, do you realize your child's exhibiting signs of autism?" It's just I'm suddenly learning all this about my child, and I've noticed that your child is exhibiting the same signs. It'd be really helpful for them if they were, if support's going to help my child, it'll probably help your child. You can't go around saying stuff like that because people do not receive it well. But you start seeing it everywhere, and then like I say, you can't unsee it, and it's like suddenly you've got this spidey sense unlocked. And yes, that in itself is challenging because you're like, okay, I can see it plain as day, but I can't say anything because people will not take it well. So I'll keep that to myself and just keep smiling. Yeah, so definitely a phase that I've been through and now live in every day. But let me know if you uh, are there too, or if you've experienced that. Another kind of phase, I guess, is learning how to talk about autism. Now, I'm not 100% sure about the how to politically correctly talk about autism, and I'm sure the terminology will change and evolve over the years, as I'm sure it already has. My kids prefer, because I have asked them to say, do you prefer to say you are autistic or that you have autism? They prefer have autism, so that's why I use that because that's what my little ones at least prefer. Dylan, who's older, uses the two interchangeably between have autism and autistic. So that's fine. I'm starting to see more people online saying they prefer the term is autistic rather than has autism. Now, originally, I think the theory when I saw it years ago was just autism's just a part of you, just not your entire, you're still you, doesn't change you. But then I think the argument is, well, actually, it does it does, like, change your identity from people in that community. So, I don't know, please don't be offended if I'm using a term that isn't your preferred. I'm just kind of going with what my children prefer, and if that changes, then I guess I'll change the terminology. I know things are changing all the time. For example, when I'm talking about my ADHD, time blindness is something that people have discussed for years, and now, in order to be sensitive to the blind community, then I've taken to calling it time obliviousness because I don't know what else to call it because you're not supposed to say time blindness. So, how to talk about it is a phase that you go through in that you suddenly realize you have to find the right words for it. And then you're trying to educate people around you and trying to explain it to your children. And then, of course, there's the whole debate about how you talk to your children about it. And my stance on it is to keep it age appropriate and to just keep it as normal and matter of fact as possible. And obviously, to your kids, your choice, whether you let them know what's going on, whether you don't. I've always kept it very, not quite blasé, that's probably the wrong term, but very much, some people struggle with this, you don't. Some people struggle with maths, you don't. It's not to say that all people with autism don't struggle with maths, but my children don't. And some people struggle with, English, you don't. You struggle with queuing, some people don't. You struggle with change of routine, some people don't. It's just everyone has their own struggles. Your particular set of struggles happens to be called autism. And what that's the way I talk to my children about it. Is that right? Is that wrong? I don't know, but that works for our family. Another kind of analogy that works is if you think of European plugs, American plugs, UK plugs, they have different, I don't understand how they work. They have different means of working. They're slightly different shapes. And but they all conduct electricity. So I guess this is a sort of analogy for perhaps how the inside of our brains are wired. So certain devices are wired certain ways, but and certain devices are wired other ways, but they all work and they all conduct electricity. They just go about it in different ways. And yeah, this has to be an analogy for inside the brain because obviously autism is not like an outwardly visible thing necessarily. If you just to take a photo of someone, you wouldn't know if they're autistic or not. But the plug analogy kind of works if you're talking about the inside of how someone's brain is wired. Yeah, so um, the other the other massive thing that you're going to go through when you're talking about this kind of stuff is dealing with other people's opinions, and this one's so hard. So you'll get the school. I mean, sometimes the school will be the source that brought it up with you, and I think this is the case in a lot of cases. And then, of course, you've got the other cases where it's the parent that's identifying the challenge because the kid's masking all day in school, and you're having to fight the school, and you're having to deal with other people's opinions about, well, they're fine in school. What do you want about? And you're just feeling like you're going mad because it's like you can't believe other people aren't seeing these struggles. And then you get people going, oh, they don't look autistic, and super unhelpful, things like that. And when they've only seen the masked, very put together version of your child, because they only have these massive meltdowns behind the scenes that only you behind closed doors and your immediate family see, it can be so, so challenging. And you get this whole mix of emotions between feeling overwhelmed, feeling cross. And obviously, you don't want your child to be struggling, but then the fact that other people can't see it means you're not able to get the help. And it's just such a battle and just so overwhelming and so infuriating and frustrating that because there's not enough evidence to tick enough boxes in they're not seeing enough in school that you can't proceed to get the help you need. And that is just horrendous. And ultimately, it can be very overwhelming and quite depressing because you'll not necessarily have much support from immediate friends and family unless they're going through something similar. You might have, especially elderly relatives, going, "Oh wow, people didn't have all this autism in my day." And I love the analogy of, well, actually, some of the planets have only recently been discovered, but I'm pretty sure they've been there all along. They had not been cited or discovered till reasonably recently in the history of our human race, but they were there the whole time. And were people, did people have autism in your day? Sometimes you want to scream, yes, you do. Or yes, the guy you're married to does, and they're in this total denial. And it's painful. It is painful, and very overwhelming and very isolating, which is why connecting with people online, having a community, like we do inside the Organised Life Club of like-minded neurodiverse families who can be there for each other is so nice because often our immediate support in our real lives, as well-meaning as they are, just don't get it, and that feels very isolating. And yes, there can be so much anger, so much going through cycles of back and forth between I'm so cross and so driven and like, right, I'm going to do this. And you're pushing, and you're sending letters and you're making phone calls, and then just feeling so overwhelmed that you've stuck in freeze mode. And then, of course, you've got the actual assessment, which for me, I didn't realize was that stressful at the time. But looking back with Will's assessment, which I'd pushed and pushed and pushed for, I came out in a rash all over my face that day. So I didn't know in my mind I was that stressed, but clearly my body was having a reaction. And I know with each of them, when we actually had the diagnosis, I went into a really bizarre kind of freeze, sort of shutdown mode a little bit. And I don't think, let me just preface this by saying that I don't think that my children having autism is it's not a negative thing. It's just how they're wired. It's understanding a specific set of challenges. And I think when your child is diagnosed with something, you're given a list of specific challenges of things they're going to face, and that can feel really overwhelming. Now, the truth of the matter is, all kids are going to face some challenges at some point. Some of them are going to be bullied. Some of them are going to break their leg when they're 8. Some of them are going to they're going to struggle with learning to read. They're going to struggle with math. There's going to be struggles, but we're not given a list of what those struggles are. You're not told, well, on this date they're going to fall out of a tree and break their arm. You don't know all that stuff because you can't see a crystal ball into the future. And when you're given your newborn baby, well, you generally give birth to your newborn baby, but it gets handed back to you after you give birth to it. And you just think, I want to wrap you up in cotton wool. I never want you to have any struggles, nothing. I don't want to have any challenges. Now, this is wildly unrealistic, but we're not normally given a list of these are going to be your struggles. Whereas when your child's given a diagnosis of anything, then you are given a list of, well, actually, these are the struggles they're going to face. And that can feel challenging because you're like, hang on, but I didn't want them to struggle with anything. I wanted their lives to be perfect. And normally you deal with these things one at a time as they come up. And I think the difference with the diagnosis is you just give them that all at once. But you have to see this as an empowering thing, at least I do, because by knowing what you struggle with, then you know how to help your child or help yourself if it's your own diagnosis in whichever situations are coming up. And that is so empowering because if you know you are short sighted and then you put on glasses, that's empowering. If you know you are dyslexic, but if you put a colored film over, then it helps you read, that's empowering. That helps you. If you know you are left handed, but you were born in a year where they used to force you to write with your right hand, then, and then suddenly you're allowed to write with your left hand, that's empowering because that's easier. So yes, you are given a list of things they're going to struggle with, which I think is why you go into this like slightly depressed stage sometimes through the process. And that can be really overwhelming. And trust me, when you get through that, then that's a lot better. But also, I think the other element of it was just the fight, 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 fight. I think I was in this fight or flight for such a long time, trying to fight, 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 push, push, push for these assessments to be done. And I was scared they wouldn't get assessed. I was scared that they would mask too much, I guess, in the assessment and things wouldn't get picked up. Spoiler alert, the assessments are designed to see through masking. So having witnessed assessments now, I don't believe that they would necessarily mistake masking for neurotypical behavior. And I also don't think they'd ever assess and diagnose a child that didn't need a diagnosis. And I know people worry about unnecessary labels. They worry about not the assessment not showing up enough or showing up things that don't exist. I've heard all these concerns. I've had them all myself. But I think it can just be so helpful to understand our children so we can help them. And I know there's so many people going, I just don't want to label my child. Unfortunately, your child's going to get labeled whether you choose to label them or not. Now, you do not have to tattoo that label on their forehead and you do not have to discuss that label with anyone if you do not wish to. But if your child is struggling with something, they chances are going to be labeled. They might be labeled as disruptive, they might be labeled as naughty, they might be labeled as hyperactive, antisocial, difficult. They might be labeled with something. It's just not necessarily a helpful label. And I think that I've heard a lot of things since I've been diagnosed with ADHD about, labeling if a horse, if you're a horse or a zebra, and if you're a zebra, but you just think you're a weird horse, but actually finding out you're a zebra is quite empowering. You're not just a weird horse. And so there's that kind of empowering understanding your own brain, but also that able to access the help that you need for your children. But yeah, I definitely went into very much like a shutdown freeze mode for 12 to 24 hours. I would say probably after most of them were diagnosed. Around the assessment, I found very overwhelming, and I found the results day very overwhelming. And what I would suggest to you is you pre-write or just write one text message because you'll generally get well-meaning people going, "Hey, like, how'd it go?" Da, da, da. You just write one message saying, "This is the results. Thanks so much for your concern. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, so I'm going to turn off my phone and I'll speak to you soon. But thanks so much. Love you lots." And just you can just copy and paste that to everyone that messages you. That's definitely how I found it helpful to help to deal with that because I was just feeling too overwhelmed to actually speak to people. But I think that was my fight or flight being engaged for so long and then almost having that kind of cortisol crash when it actually happened. It's like, oh my gosh, we actually got here. We got as far as the assessment. It's happened. And yeah, just sort of stepping out of fight or flight and trying to get back to normal and ex- just coming to is it the end of the roller coaster? I know the end of the roller coaster of the assessment process, because obviously, then, as we know, there can often be challenges trying to access help. And then sometimes our children go through, especially with autism, phases of having been incredibly challenging with one thing. There was one stage when William was small, he would not eat anything unless I counted to 20 first. I do not know how we got into that rut. I can't remember how we got out of it, but I know now he eats all day, every day, and I don't count ever. But that was such a real thing once, and that felt so all consuming. So, yes, a couple of comments. Kelly, hi Kelly. We've just received our assessment appointment for my son. I'm feeling all the feelings right in the middle of the roller coaster. Huge, huge hugs, Kelly. Hopefully, some of the resources I've pointed you in the right direction of will help. Definitely go through the 100 signs of autism checklist. That's totally free. And then if you want to download the autism Journey Journal, then that's inside of the club too. Hopefully that will super duper help you. I'm actually going to do a workshop working through the Autism Journey Journal inside of the Organised Life Club. This Friday inside of the Organised Life Club, we are doing a summer planning workshop. I haven't got a printout of it actually because my printer is rather inconveniently playing up. But I've got summer holiday planner for parents, and we're going to go through that together and look at everything from summer bucket lists to creating our own summer rules with our kids. Just wondering how and looking at and planning for how can we really maximize the summer to automate as much as possible, figure out all the sticky points like childcare and all that kind of stuff, and make lists of things that kids can do so they're not doing the constant I'm bored. And we're going to go through all of that in the workshop to really plan out the summer for success. And I've also got loads of printables for the kids as well, things from mindfulness to journaling exercises to summer bucket list, loads and loads of fun. So that's all inside of the club. Make sure if you're inside of the club, that's mummyoffour.com/join. Make sure you download those before the workshop if you're joining live, which is this Friday, the 11th of July at 9:30 a.m. But it will be on catch up. So you can watch the replay in there. But before you tune into the workshop, make sure you download those printables. Then next month inside the club, we are going to be doing our back to school planning. So I'm putting together a full back to school planner. We're going to go through all of that together, go through all the back to school stock takes, just all of that stuff's going to be amazing. Oh, Kelly says I've been working through the summer planner already. Thanks so much for. Oh, I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, we're going to go through all of that together. I'm so glad you've already started working through it, Kelly. That's really exciting. But yeah, we're gonna go through all of that completely on Friday. The back to school planner is not quite finished yet, but I will be uploading that to the club when that's finished ahead of the workshop. And then we're going back to some more routine stuff. So there's already on replay, you can catch inside the club the workshops. There's a routine assessment workshop. This is especially handy if you've got a neurodiverse family. And remember, you do not need to wait for your children to be assessed in order to put things in place in order to help them. So things like structure and routine really help kids with autism, but quite frankly, it's not going to harm any children. So, you know, if you just want to automate your life a little bit more, there's so much about routine inside the club. So we've got the routine assessment workshop and the mealtime routine workshop, which covers everything from fuss eating to meal planning, all that kind of stuff. That's already inside of the club. And we're coming up, we've got the weekend reset routine workshop, and then we're going to be looking at bedtime and evening routines and morning routines after that. Katie's Room says, hi, Ree. My daughter has just received an autism diagnosis after a 5-year journey. It's such a long slog, isn't it? And I think this is one of the things I sort of meant to say. I'm not sure if I did, but through that 5-year journey, there would have been huge gaps where nothing happened. And then you're expected to remember what happened in the last appointment. And it's such a drag, isn't it? So, Katie, well done for getting through it. It's such a relief to get a diagnosis, but now it's like what to do next. And the adrenaline of fighting is worn off. Yes. Yes, Katie, that has hit the nail on the head. And I think there's so little support out there. So many people say to me, so what support do you get for your children? It's like, well, actually, not lots, which is why having communities is just so helpful because so many of the things that actually help aren't necessarily through formal support, although that is helpful within the school system. It's things that we can put in place in our own homes. It's systems that we can put in place. It's how we can educate friends and families, how we can educate ourselves, educate our children, how we discuss things. And that's kind of the support that we kind of offer within inside the Organised Life Club, as well as how we just, because if you have got a neurodiverse family, you've just got more to organise, okay? You've got more to do. There is more. There's all the extra paperwork. There's all the extra stuff on top of the just general trying to keep your head above water, which is why we put together all of the systems inside of the Organised Life system, which is different modules to work through, where we can make sure that we're making life at home as easy as possible. We're automating whatever we can to take more off our cognitive loads, to make sure our children have the routine that they need, that they crave, and to just make life that little bit easier because getting organised, the reason we get organised is to give ourselves some more breathing space, isn't it? So that we can avoid burnout, which is my theme for the year, which is why I cancelled the last live, which is why I put it off till now. So we can avoid burnout and actually be able to be there for our children without losing our tiny little minds and making ourselves ill and running ourselves into the ground because that's not fun. Been there, done that, not up for it anymore. So Kelly, I'm sending huge hugs about the fight. Obviously, we will offer more support for that. I'm going through the Autism Journey Journal and the workshop inside the club, so I know you'll be there for that. And Katie, I'm so like, well done for fighting, well done for getting through that. I'd love you to come and join us inside the club. There's support inside of there. And the other thing I would say is just speak to your children's school, speak to your child's school, and just see what support can be offered there, because that's a really good starting point. Because obviously, if your child's not with you, she's probably with the school, and that's a really good starting point for support. So yeah, the waiting game, covered that, I think, just looking at my notes very briefly. Um, the waiting game is so hard. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the guilt and the grief. And it's not, none of this is a reflection on our children. But the guilt of not spotting things soon enough, should have done this, should have done that. I'm saying this for my benefit as much as yours. It's not helpful. Just call it out for what it is and just say, okay, this is not helpful. Beating myself up. I can't go back in time and change it. We're all gonna try and stop beating ourselves up for things we can't change in the past. And the grief isn't about being sad that your child has autism. It's being sad that they're ever gonna face any struggles ever. Um, but I think once you come through all of that, I know, speaking from personal experience, it's actually easier than if you were to just bury your head in the sand, because I know my children would not be thriving as much as they are now if I hadn't been able to identify their struggles, if I hadn't been able to access the help that they need. I mean, William especially, who was diagnosed the youngest, is literally a poster child for early intervention. He is so different from that child that was the most obvious of my kids, with his challenges when he was younger. So yeah, huge, just a huge poster child for early intervention. Fangirl for whatever 11 says, has Zara been diagnosed with autism now? Yes, Zara was diagnosed ages ago. I want to say post-pandemic, because I think we were still wearing masks and things. And that's one of the reasons that there was a big fight over the whole Zara thing. You can go back and you watch the videos, but basically it was a case of she was supposed to be being assessed, and then there was a massive gap, obviously, with the world shut down. And then they were like, "Oh, she's too old now. We'll palm her over to the school." And I was like, "No, no, no, no." She was due to be assessed. She was of the right age. You just assess her, please. And then they tried to fob me off with one doctor who literally didn't look at her. This doctor sat facing me, and Zara was behind her, asked me a few questions, which did indicate autism. And then this doctor tried to say that she didn't see enough signs. So I had to fight that and fight that and fight that and just be like, look, she literally didn't see enough evidence. I know she's just, this is wrong. And I had to push and push and push. And eventually she did get assessed and she was diagnosed. She is, however, Zara, my little darling, I see so much of me in her. So I'm thinking Zara and Dylan actually are probably more ADHD, which means autism and ADHD. Um, I Dylan and I are going to have a chat. Dylan and I are going to pursue perhaps an ADHD diagnosis for him, or at least an assessment. And for Zara, I want her. I don't feel that it's absolutely crucially urgent for her to be assessed today for ADHD, but I know for moving forward, for especially as she goes into secondary school and perhaps she's got more complex needs, because life is a lot more complex, especially with girl friendships and exams and all things. I know that she needs to be assessed. So in order for her to be assessed, not obsessed, and in order for her to be assessed, she needs to be on the waiting list, which at the moment, I'm going to admit, we're having a bit of a sticky fight with. But hey ho, but we'll get through that. Anyway, as soon as I get off this live and YouTube lets me, I'm going to put some playlist of helpful videos about autism on screen now. Join me inside the Organised Life Club for lots of support and all of the printables and things that I talked about. If you all are listening on the podcast, please do rate, review, subscribe. It super duper helps. And I'll see you guys very soon for another chat. Bye.